Right, folks, welcome back to the next episode of the Live 4D Now podcast, where our aim is to help people thrive in all four dimensions of life. So body, mind, soul, and spirit. And today we're going to go deep into the heart of what it means to truly heal. And so today I'm joined by Al and Mel Erwee, who are professional mental health counselors with over 2 decades of ministry experience. So their approach is going to be tender, powerful, and definitely rooted in God's presence. And so if you've ever struggled with trauma, emotional pain, addiction, or identity, this conversation will remind you that healing is possible, that restoration is real, and also that you're not alone. And so let's dive straight into it. So welcome, Mel and Al.
Greetings. Hello. Lovely to be here.
Is it wrong?
Yes. And how are you guys this morning?
We are very well, very blessed. Thank you.
Good. Tell us just a little bit before we get into some of the meaty stuff. Like, where are you guys from? Where are you based? How did you guys meet? Maybe in a just a nutshell.
Well, that's so funny because we get asked that question often, and because we travel a lot, it's kind of neither here nor there. But we currently are based in Magaliesburg. We met in Kempton Park. We both come from Kempton, yay, South Africa. And
Yes.
we've been married now for 22 years. Almost 20. No, 23. We're going on 23. Wow. Yes, thank you, Jesus.
Yes.
So we've been married now for 23 years, and we have 3 beautiful kids. And, we've been in ministry now for 20 odd years and in the mission field for 13 of those years. So that's why I say we've done a lot of traveling. I think home for us is kingdom.
Yeah.
And home is where you guys are.
That's
together.
It. There we go.
Exactly.
That's it. Home is where the heart is. This is our home, family.
Okay. Brilliant. So tell me, let's maybe begin there, because it's a really important thing. You mentioned you've been in ministry for 20 years. I mean, that's a lifetime basically for a lot of people. Yeah. So how did you two together come to walk this path of ministry, but then also mental health?
Wow.
How
That's
did that
such a good
start?
question. So both of us actually come from families that were in ministry.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where it all began. I'd like to say that both our fathers were pastors. Actually, my father was a worship pastor. He ministered from the drums, so he was a drummer as well. And so we kind of grew up in the church, but we also got to see a different side of that. And the reason we got into restoration and mental health therapy was we saw that with our folks, they didn't deal with the rooted issues in their lives. And because they didn't know then what we know now about inner healing, a lot of that was suppressed, and it started to manifest in their lives where they kind of just went on, I almost want to say it became more religious than relational. And that took its toll on us as families. And we saw 2 sides of that, 2 aspects of that. So we saw ministry on or worship, church on a Sunday. And in the week, it was, there was a huge lack. So it created or caused a question in us, both of us actually, as to what does relationship with the Father really look like? If we're seeing the religious side of it. And with that being said, there was a lot of patterns and cycles that were being formed that caused destruction and therefore a lot of trauma growing up. And we decided when we got married, we want to end that cycle. And we said, up till here and no more. And for us, we really asked the Lord, I think the question was, you said, what does it look like? What is walking out a journey with the Father look like in terms of us as a family? Because it begins at home. And that was the major lack that we saw growing up, was that it didn't start from home. There was no peace at home because it wasn't a relational factor. And so we started to journey that out, and through that journey, we saw restoration. Yeah. So that's kind of how it started for us.
I think we come from backgrounds where pain became a norm in a religious point of view. And we started discovering the truth. And while they discover that truth, we realize we need to make a move. We need to start to respond on what we hear, what God is leading us, what the Holy Spirit is teaching us. And that is the challenge when you've been grinded into that culture of pain and survival. Yeah, so we started walking that journey and said, Lord, what does it look like as a family to walk in freedom?
Yeah. And I think we didn't choose this work, it kind of chose us.
Yeah.
And as we healed, people just kept showing up, and we realized our pain wasn't for nothing. That the Lord really showed us that there was purpose in the pain. Yeah.
And so ultimately your story, what you guys experienced, helped you then help other people through similar things. But here's, I'm just saying this a little bit tongue in cheek, is that, so you guys are saying that not all pastors and Christians have it all together on the inside.
I know, for sure. I mean, because it's become such a real factor to us. So for me personally, I think when it became a real reality for me, I was about 18 years old. And so, you grow up with hearing the word, and you see things, and it was all head-based for me. But when it became an actual heart revelation was when I had an encounter with Jesus. And I felt that from that point of, or how to say, from that place of encountering him, that's when I started to see that this is real. Jesus is real. It's not just about tools, but it's a spirit-filled lifestyle. And combining the two, you see freedom. Yeah.
Very, very good. Al, do you want to add anything to that?
You know that when you start to discover truth, it comes. It sometimes feel like a heaviness when you and how to deal with that. People struggle with it, and what is the reality of this? And once the truth starts to be revealed, it is like, what is the next step? And it sometimes can feel lonely, but also when you start to discover it from the presence of God, everything starts to change.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of leads on to the next section, because obviously your faith and your personal journey with God has been a huge element in your lives and in your counseling and your ministry and the people you help. So I heard it that you guys say like healing flows from God's presence.
Yes.
Can you unpack for me just a little bit what that looks like practically in a coaching space or in a counseling setting? What does that look like practically?
You want to answer that first?
You know, it's definitely a realization to come to a point where you first have to admit what you're struggling with. And when it comes to the presence of God, you know, when you sit with people and you tell them about the presence of God from a place of his presence, and you've never operated from that, is how do you bring that over in a practical way, like to get to your question. And it does take time to understand when it comes from operating from the presence, but there's so many different practical ways. If you look around you in creation, how God created, if you look at the soil, if you look at how everything works together, and you know, when you plant a seed that is not planted in the ground and fertile ground, it cannot operate. And using that illustration, by using the presence of God is the soil, it's the source. And to continuously be focused on being in his presence, getting people to continually focus on being in that place and basically positioning yourself there. It's a definitely a heart matter. It's a choice, but to operate from that, it's a physical action. A day when you wake up in the morning, you know, who feels like, you know, sometimes you don't even feel like worshiping or praising God, But we wake up in
Right.
the morning, everybody, each one of us, we wake up and we have to make that practical choice to say, okay, I'm going to sit in his presence and wait upon his presence. And from that place of his presence, start to identify what is God busy doing now. Yeah.
I think it's not just about tools or technique. It's about creating space for His presence, and we always welcome Holy Spirit into every session because we cannot do it without Him. He is the life source. He is the light. He is our light and our salvation.
Yeah.
And I think with every session we bring, we welcome Him in. I always say we're just facilitators of the presence of God, and He just moves on our behalf. And I think He always comes when you welcome Him in. He always comes, and we've seen Him move in the most phenomenal way. Sometimes it's silence, sometimes it's tears, but He's always present. And we cannot do it without Him. It has to derive from His presence.
It is practical and supernatural, but I do believe God meets the people where they're at.
Yeah.
In His presence, but He meets them where they're at.
Yeah.
So on that note, when you're speaking with families, couples, individuals, how much of that do you draw from your own experiences? So when you say practically, you've experienced a whole lifetime of stuff and struggles and the wins and the victories as well. Does that, a lot of that come out in the way you reach other people where they're at right now?
Yeah, I think the journey that we've walked has kept us humble. It's also given us discernment.
Yeah.
Because it's relational, not relational. It's what did I want to say? It's real. And I mean, even now we work at a restoration center, and these are the place where we're working. It's a rehabilitation, and a lot of guys are coming in have it's many forms of addiction, but there's a lot of spiritual stuff that they're coming in as well. And that's the word I wanted to say is it's relatable. Through our journey
Relatable,
and
yeah.
through our discovery, we're still on a journey. We see God's goodness in what He's, like the word says, taste and see that the Lord is good. And in order to taste and see, you've got to experience. And there's something about experiencing His healing. There's something, it's tangible. So for us, it's real, it's authentic. It's from the place of authenticity.
Yeah.
And through the journey that we walked out, God is real. Jesus is real. It's such a tangible thing for us that we get to share that He is the hope of glory. Because we've lived it. We see it daily. We're still walking it out. We've seen His goodness. The word says that goodness and mercy will follow us all the days of our life. And it's a continuous overflow, again, from His presence, where we experience His goodness, we experience His grace, we experience His healing. And we get to share from that because it's a wellspring of life that never stops flowing.
I think because we've lived and gone through so much on our journey, we can very easily see beneath the surface. And He's given us that discernment, and we're not afraid of people's messes.
No.
And we've seen what He can do with the mess.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, and I mean, when you mention that, and I really appreciate you guys sharing that, is so often us as counselors, coaches, therapists, you're so often stepping into other people's pain.
Yeah.
From a place of like, I've been there. I know where you've been, so I'm stepping into that hole with you. Now,
That's
this
right.
might be a little bit of a personal question, so if you don't want to answer this, is okay.
No, go for it.
But how do you guys deal with the emotional weight of stepping into other people's pain?
Well, we have to release it. I mean, one thing that we do is when we go in, as I said, we always welcome we cannot do it without the Father. But one thing that we do often is we dust each other's shoulders off because the pain is real. And we remind ourselves that we cannot carry it ourselves physically. So we always surrender it. I think it comes from the place of surrender. And I think that's the most important part of healing is from the place of surrender. we cannot do it ourselves. If we do, it causes or creates codependency. So our heart is always, as I said, again, we are facilitators of God's presence. Our heart is to connect the people to the Father. Our job is to connect them to the one who can take it, who can carry it, to point them or lead them in that direction, so that there is consistency, that it's sustainable. It's a continued relationship. Again, you can have tools and you can have techniques, but without the Father, it amounts to nothing.
You know, we sometimes deal with quite heavy things, and how can you not be affected by that?
Right.
But I think
Right.
accountability towards one another, and just like Mel said, dusting off, but covering one another.
Yeah.
And
Washing in the Word.
surrendering, that true surrender, and releasing it, and that is what it's all about. Is Jesus is the focus.
Yeah. Keep the main thing, and that's the Father.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate that. And the reason I asked that question is, me as a helper as well, you realize, like, man, we have to live this stuff before we can teach this stuff. And I can see that in your life, in the way you're talking. It's like, hey, yeah, we are able to help. We're able to get you through that thing because we've first been there. Not perfectly, and definitely we're also human. But if we don't put in the work, it becomes really hard to help others.
That's right. That's right. And it takes its toll on a person as well, because it's human nature. I am like my personality. I have this tendency to want to carry everybody and save everybody, and it's just the mercy in me
All the
and the
weight.
compassion. And Albert has to remind me again, you got to give it to the Lord. You've got to lead them to the Father, because he can take it.
Yeah.
He's able to take it. He's got big shoulders, but there's that discernment factor of where you have to step. I almost want to say you have to step back and allow the Lord to step in and do what he does best. We're there to comfort and to guide, but the greatest counsel of all is the Holy Spirit.
So good. So tell me, on that note, because we deal with a lot of people's pain and their struggles, when people come to you and they're like, I've tried everything. I'm beyond help. I've done all these terrible things. How would you gently, just in a nutshell, obviously this is not a whole session, but how would you gently remind them that it's okay, but there is another place or another way you can start again?
I think we always start with the permission to stop striving, because often it is striving, and we say, healing requires surrender, and it's that place of true surrender to the Lord. I think people have tried so many ways, methods, techniques, and it's not sustainable, or it's a quick fix, So when we start the process or the journey with them, we always remind them that it's in the place of true surrender, but with the permission to say, are you ready to really release and to surrender to the Lord, to do what he does best?
We normalize the process, and we want to allow them to connect again with their hearts and the heart of God. And God is not in a hurry. Most of the time, we put such a heaviness on our shoulders when we feel we have to resolve it right now. And I love it. In farming, we teach the guys, how do you eat the elephant? It's like that's saying a piece at a time.
One bite at a time.
And it is so important to take it a step at a time and not expect everything to suddenly, now it's going to go well. After a session, I'm done, it feels good. And then you go and you see familiarity around you. How do you handle that? And God is not in a hurry.
Yeah. Healing isn't linear. I think the thing is, we help people reconnect with their heart.
Yeah.
And to truly listen and hear what is really going on. I think it's the reconnecting factor.
Yeah.
But that comes from the place of surrender. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. And, what I'm hearing in that as well is you guys create a lot of space for people just to be vulnerable, because they've dealt with some pains. And a lot of what you guys have spoken about is maybe past relationship hurts or church hurt or faith hurt, or maybe they're even angry with God. Like,
Yes.
how do you guys accommodate that where people can just be themselves without you trying to fix them? I loved what you guys said is we create the space, but ultimately they've got to come with the willingness. But how do you do that practically? How do you invite people in just to be themselves, be open and vulnerable, and then carry on the journey?
Safety is everything, and we don't rush people. We model trust before we expect it. So I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, we're not shy about church hurt. There is pain from that place, and especially when you thought it was a safe space. And the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. But he's come to give life. And,
That's right.
And it's people. It's not the church, but it's people. And God is a God that loves.
Sure.
And we want to connect him to the Father.
Yeah. The thing is, man will fail you, man will disappoint you, and we often tell people that wasn't God. I heard something the other day, and it was so beautiful. Todd White was sharing, and he said, we've all experienced disappointments, and we've experienced betrayal. And he said, the night that Jesus, with the Last Supper, that Jesus sat with the disciples, I think it starts, the scene or the setup starts out with Jesus saying, someone here is about to betray me. And on the other side of that was the breaking of bread. And it was such a beautiful illustration that on the other side of betrayal, there is communion with the Father. On the other side of disappointment, there is this healing and restoration that comes through the breaking of bread. And we've learned that. I mean, we've walked it out. We've experienced church hurt ourselves, but it's so beautiful when you see it from a godly perspective, that was never God's intention or his heart. That's when religion steps in, and religion for me is a separation of relationship with the Father, because that's not the Father's heart. When we are doing things from the Father's heart, it's always connected, it's always whole, it always brings healing. But I just feel like there's been this false representation of the Father's heart, and that leads people astray. So
we want to separate religion from relationship.
That's right.
And once you can do that, then the healing process.
I think so. Most certainly.
So on that note, do you guys ever find like there's some resistance to faith-based counseling? For example, people that maybe aren't on that same faith journey or on a different path, or you've got differences in opinions. How do you approach that? Firstly, staying true to what you guys are, your calling and your conviction, but also gently steering clients to find their healing, even if there's a little bit resistance to your faith, what you believe, etc.
Yes, no, most certainly. I think the important thing is that we never force people. Or we never, we never force faith. That's an important thing. We never force faith. We meet people where they are at. And over time, the peace of God and his love softens them. And that resistance, or like I almost wanted to bring Afrikaans somewhere, but that resistance seems to die. Over the sessions, they get to experience his peace. And that peace is powerful. Peace is a weapon. And it disarms. Those walls start to come down when they see that there's a realness factor to that. I agree.
I agree. Sorry. It's good that you guys agree. So in talking about like restoration of spirit, soul, body, mind, I mean, it's really beautiful that because restores means something has been depleted. Something was lost, something is missing, but now we're restoring that. Can you break down, just in your own words for both of you, just briefly, what does it mean to restore in all four dimensions, like body, mind, soul, and spirit? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think when we look at it wholeheartedly, you can't separate them when it comes to the healing process. When your spirit is connected to our spirit is connected to God. And our soul, your emotions, your mind,
your will,
and then your body, the trauma that your bodies have experienced. So everything works works.
Connected.
Needs to be alignment with those three. And once you can bring that alignment, there's so much healing that can take place. But you cannot separate them.
Sometimes I think emotional healing won't land until we've addressed physical dysregulation.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we experience breakthrough. Well, breakthrough won't happen until there's actually, like Albert said, breakthrough won't happen until there's a spiritual alignment.
Yes.
And so we begin in the place of the heart. We believe in wholehearted living. And I think that once we address the matters of the heart, often you see a fractured soul. I always give this illustration that people sort of suppress the brokenness inside of them, or traumas from the past is suppressed, and you see that manifested in their physique or their bodies. And they think they're okay spiritually, and they try to run ahead, and it's like this elastic band effect where they're running, and then because they haven't dealt with the soul issues or the brokenness or the fracturedness in their hearts, it just pulls them back every time. So it's important to address the matters of the heart first and foremost. Yeah.
So what does that look like if we talk about the heart and the emotions and that emotional wellness or wholeness? What does it look like when someone achieves that? Not perfection, because I don't think that exists, but at least
not at all.
freedom and being better.
Yeah, I think it's not
What does
about
that look
having
like?
no pain. I think it's not about having no pain. It's about able to respond to life.
Yeah.
From truth,
Not trauma.
and not trauma. Yeah.
And I think wholeness looks like inner peace.
Yeah.
It's healthy boundaries and living from love, not fear. Perfect love casts out all fear. It's freedom to be with God, who God has created you to be.
Yeah.
And it's from the place of authenticity. I think we have to be real with who we are and what is going on in our lives. Again, it's from the place of surrender. I mean, we're still journeying it. Like you said, it's not perfect, but there's that scripture that says that even in our weakness, He's been made perfect, And it's so beautiful because He takes us as a whole and He breathes life back into our dry bones or into the broken parts of us. But I believe that every part is beautiful. Like, it's the beauty from ashes scenario. He takes that and He binds it up unto Himself. And in His perfection, we're growing and we're being strengthened and we're being healed daily. But it's walking out that journey with God and being real with who we are and where we are at, so that He can come and bring wholeness and restoration.
I think the first questions you heard about the seed, and I love farming. I love sustainable farming. We teach on that as well. But when we talk about the ground and the healing of the ground, and the process of healing ground takes years. It can take up to 10 years before the ground really gets to its norm. And but you start to receive the results after already within the next year to 3 years. And the results is in the fruits. And the Word of God speaks about the fruits.
Sure.
But the time that it takes.
Yeah.
And that is so important to anchor yourself, but allow that ground to heal. And it needs to happen naturally.
That's right.
And that's why we are so focused on the presence of God.
Yeah.
Because that is where we need to be anchored to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. And again, you're emphasizing that you can't rush these things. There's a journey. It's a path.
That's right.
Like healing doesn't happen overnight. It can.
No.
It can.
Yes,
but typically, it's a journey.
We've seen.
But it is a process.
Yeah.
It's the process of the heart. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Tell me, and I might be throwing you a little bit under the bus with this question, but do you agree with this statement? What do you think about this statement that 100% of your emotions is directed by 100% of your thoughts?
Well, I agree with that. And I'm going to tell you why. I believe.
Yeah.
So the Lord has really been speaking to me lately about Romans 12, being transformed in the renewing of the mind. And I think those two are definitely connected, because what we're thinking often is what we're portraying. So, the word of God talks about what's in your heart is going to come out your mouth. But what you're seeing and what you're hearing, it plays a major role in how you're going to respond. So if your thoughts are negative the whole time, if you're living in self-doubt or fear, that's what you're going to experience. And emotions play a major role in that, because you're going to respond to what you're experiencing on the inside of you. It's connected. But and that's where patterns form, that's where cycles form, and that's where we end up going back to the same old thing, because it's interconnected. But I feel like once there has been a freedom in the mind, there is an instant release in how we respond to those things. And that I think that
I think it definitely also can agree. The confession of your tongue.
Sure.
When you speak, and how much is coming from that death and life is in the power of the tongue.
That's right.
And those who use it eat the fruits of it. And you can sow. I think Mel mentioned about how many people start to take form, and that's what they speak.
Sure. They literally start to manifest.
And what comes from the inside, from the mind, and how powerful the mind is.
Minds, yeah.
And that is where our biggest battle is.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's why we say take every thought captive.
That's correct. That's correct.
I agree.
And like I've been really meditating on this. The other day I sat with it, and I like the Lord said to me, this was his question to me. It's like, he said, what is my will? And I thought I was Miss Clever Pants, Smarty Pants. And I was like, I know that one. It's your good, acceptable, and perfect will. And he goes, but Mel, what is that? And he took me further, and he said, just read a little bit earlier, in the word. And I was reading Romans 12, and he spoke to me about being transformed in the renewal of our mind. And I sat with that and I meditated on that. And the Lord said, but what does renewing of the mind look like? And I said, well, Lord, it's just being in your word. It's being with you. It's filling my mind with who you are and your spoken word. And then he said to me, but who is the word? And I said, Jesus. And, that for me has been life-changing when I sit with the Father. It's like lately, the more we spend time with him, it just naturally pours out of you. You can't stop thinking about him. You're singing about him. You're talking about him. Everything is about him. And it begins in that place of intimacy. Yeah. I feel that's the key.
So good. And I think that kind of flows into, firstly, I don't think we should ever be doing life alone and faith alone. And so just in what you guys do, how much do you encourage accountability, not just with yourselves, but with greater community, fellowships, that kind of thing?
Well, it's crucial. Community, for us, accountability is crucial.
Yeah.
And healing is personal, but it's also communal. Here's the thing. We've all been wounded in relationships, but healing also comes in relationships. So we need each other. We can never walk this life or this journey alone.
Yeah. Accountability is not control.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not control at all.
Great point.
Yeah. It's love in action.
Yes.
It's
it says
it reminds you it reminds you of who you are.
That's right.
And it's definitely not control.
Yeah.
And also just you're not alone.
That's right.
And so what I'm gathering from you as well is that as we are whole, it helps us then help others to be whole. So the journey never really stops with me being whole and full of life and thriving. It's so that I can give back to others, so they can give back to others. And so it starts a cycle.
Yes.
Or like a ripple effect.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. There's that, we say brokenness begets brokenness, and the opposite is also true. I think from the place of healing, as you said, there's that wellspring of life that flows, and it doesn't stop. It doesn't dry up. We have overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Testimony is so powerful. Yeah. It also says, I see you and I hear you, and you are not alone. Yeah. And that's a huge thing that's lacking nowadays, is the isolation factor. I think that people are so isolated, and that just breeds further decay and just the lies that they're dwelling in or sitting in. It's this huge messy puddle. And I think that's what community does. Community comes, it reaches out a hand and it pulls you out of the mess to say, You don't have to sit in this mess. We want to walk this journey out with you from the place of love, not control, as Al said.
One of the biggest tactics of the enemy is to separate and to isolate.
Yeah.
And the moment he can isolate us, he can start to
play with us.
He can bring in that point.
That's right.
But we have not been called. I think nobody has been called to be alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, absolutely
We can't.
not.
We can't do it alone.
Yeah. Guys, it's been a pleasure just having some conversation and just hearing some of your own stories, some of your faith. And I'm sure there's going to be more of these happening in the future. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into you guys and what you do and where you are and hear some of you guys have some wild stories that I've just heard little bits and pieces of.
Yeah,
and how God comes through with your kids. And I mean, there was death and violence. I mean, crazy stuff. So I'd love to get into that at a future point. And just, I think it'll benefit so many people who are struggling, who feel like, man, life is so dark and there's no hope. But I think your lives, your story, who you are is a testimony of what God can do. And the determination, the discipline to follow him and walk in his footsteps, I think it shines out in your lives. And so I'd love to have another time soon and we can talk a little bit more about those things. So maybe just as a closing thought from each of you, if someone was listening to this today, but they're feeling stuck in any area, what would be your advice or your suggestion of how to start? Where should they begin? And just maybe a final encouragement to someone who's struggling in any area.
Yeah.
I think you need to start where you're at. You need to start where you're at. And he'll be there. I think that when we spoke about surrender, when you come to a place, we start where you're at and you can surrender. It's a beginning.
Yeah.
It's a start. Yeah.
I think for me, thing that I would want people to hear right now is, what lie am I believing about myself right now? I think that's a great place to start. Like, what lie have I partnered with? What lie am I believing about myself? And then to ask the Father to come in and replace that lie with his truth. I think, and then also the most important thing that I would want anybody to hear at any given time, any day, is that you are not alone.
Yeah. One of the greatest things is to not keep it for yourself, but to speak to somebody.
Step back.
Get it out. Bring it into the light so that it can be dealt with.
Yeah.
Once it's in the light, freedom can start to happen.
That's right. And God is so faithful. You know, I always say to people, if I look back on my life, I see him in every detail. I love saying this often. He truly is above all things, through all things, and in all things. He is in every detail of our lives. And if we just simply look back, take a look back, you will truly see the goodness of God.
Yeah.
So good. And like I say, I hope that's really encouraging to some folks. I think a couple of things I've heard just to reframe or reflect what you were saying is we're only ever one strategy away from success. So you can start somewhere, even if you've tried everything. But I love what you said there at the end is, often we've got to name the truth and shame the lie. Because a lot of times we chase after the lies and we get ourselves all stuck because we've believed something that is absolutely not true. And so I heard it said once beautifully by someone is that often we've got to get ourselves out from underneath the sewer pipe of the enemy's lies, and we've got to come under the waterfall of God's truth and grace.
That's it.
And so I think that's really what you guys have been saying a lot of today in a summary. Would you agree with that?
Yes, we agree with you.
Completely.
Yes.
Well, fantastic, guys. It's really been good. Like I said, I'd love to have you guys back on, and we'll arrange that soon. And so for everyone that's listening, I hope this has been helpful. I'll follow up with just a closing caption or two, but we look forward to seeing you guys soon again in the future.
Thank you so much, Rob.
See you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us for another podcast. It was great to have just a good chat with Al and Mel and just see where they come from and how they approach counseling and therapy and helping others. What I admire most about Al and Mel is their gentle strength. they're not just counselors, they are soul surgeons working with their faith and wisdom to help people walk again, especially after seasons of pain. And one of the, I think, big actionable insights from this podcast were start where you can. And a lot of times God will meet you at that place. And ask yourself this, what lie am I believing about myself that's keeping me from healing? Go home or after this podcast, take a look and think about that. Take a look at yourself, reflect. How has this pain been affecting me? And how can I just start something small today on that journey of healing? And so if today's episode stirred something in your heart, whether you're battling with anxiety or trauma or relational pain, reach out to Al and Mel directly at our website. So www.live4dnow.com. Or you can join our school community, and all the links are provided at the bottom. But you could join our school community. You can chat with Al and Mel. You can book sessions with them or with some of our other providers. But don't hesitate. If you feel like this has reached you at some level, reach out. We are here to help. And you can begin your journey to restoration today. Or perhaps you don't need this so much, but maybe you know someone that's struggling, that's hurting, that's in pain. Share this with that someone that needs hope. One share can open the door to a lot of healing. We look forward to seeing you soon at another episode. Take care.